set, thanks.
We're all set, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the November 21, 2023 meeting of the Orange Town Plan and Zoning Commission. I am Commissioner Ozzie Parenti. I'll ask that those seated at the desk, please, at the table, please introduce themselves.
Tom Tarenti.
Kevin Cornell.
Judy Smith.
Jack Demerjen, zoning administrator.
We have almost everybody here tonight. We're missing Commissioner Paul Kaplan. He's away on vacation, but get him at the next meeting. And before we get started with our agenda, I just wanted to say congratulations to Judy and Tom on their reelection to the commission. Paul as well. He's obviously not here, but he retains his seat on the commission. So it's good that we'll have the team together in the new year, you know. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, on our agenda then, this evening, first item, review of the minutes from October 17, 2023 meeting. I don't know if we'll ever get out of here tonight without Paul, who will make a motion to adjourn the meeting. We'll be stuck here for a while. Right. So anyway, on the minutes, I had a few things if you want me to get started. On the second page, third full paragraph starts, Chairman Parenti noted that this petition to amend, you get down to the third line, and it says applicant's intention was to demolish an existing building. And I think it was actually demolish a portion of the existing building, which is significant.
I thought they were two separate structures.
The way I saw it on the tax assessor's field
Not
card,
sure.
it looked like one building.
I-
But in
I-
any event, all
Yeah,
right.
putting a portion of the building.
Yeah, a portion of the existing building, or a portion of the building,
Yeah.
that's fine. Because then, you get to the end of that paragraph, Mr. Demerjen and the commission indicated that this can be viewed as an intensification of the existing car wash on site, not an expansion. I would add a sentence to that, and I'll give you this. I would say, as such, the use could continue with the improvements contemplated as a legal non-conforming use under the Orange Town zoning regulations, because that was the whole point, was that, because it was what we called an intensification versus an expansion, that it was a legal, non-conforming use. They didn't need the relief they were before the commission for, so. You have that language, or?
I have something like it. At the
Yeah.
end of the meeting, I could definitely take that.
All right. I'll continue, then I had just one more thing. Oh, no, I'm sorry, in that next paragraph, in the middle of the paragraph, in order to add additional self-cleaning vacuums, I would take out self-cleaning and just say add additional auto vacuums, right? That was. And at the bottom of the page, the line begins session to discuss a litigation matter. Instead of on Marsh Hill Road, I'd say involving 88 Marsh Hill Road. And that's all I had.
Deb, we're about halfway down on page 2.
Yep.
Directly above application for the conversion. How the last word of that sentence, I think, wants to be entirety.
Absolutely right, yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, anything else? Kevin, you all set?
Oh, on
I have no comments.
Tom?
page 3, right below the first paragraph, you've got Julie Williams. I think you want that
She's
to be
back again.
Judy Smith.
It's actually
Or
July
July
Williams.
Williams.
All right, glad we caught that one. All right, if everybody's set now, somebody prepared to move that we accept the minutes?
I will make a motion that we accept the minutes from October 17th as amended.
Okay, do we have a
Second.
second? It's been seconded by Commissioner Cornell. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Do we have anything to discuss under the topic of old business? How about new business? All right, then, let's get a report from our zoning enforcement officer.
Yeah, I'm just gonna keep it very short tonight. As you can see, we haven't had a ton of site plan applications coming in because we have a lot under construction at the moment. So I think that goes to show that, you know, we really are busy at the moment, and the building department is doing a lot of inspections on these housing facilities because they have to inspect every unit. So that has been moving along slowly. But other than that, everything's been fairly status quo, and if anyone has anything for me, I am all ears.
No, nothing in particular.
All right, well,
right.
if anything changes, I'll be sure to let everyone know.
All right, then we can get right to our public hearings this evening. We have two. And we need to start by reading the legal notice. Paul usually does that, but Judy, do you have it there? Do you want to do it for us?
Okay, to appear one time on Wednesday, November 8th, 2023, and one time on Wednesday, November 15th, 2023, the Orange TPZC Notice of Public Hearing. Notice is hereby given that on Tuesday, November 21 of 2023 at 7 p.m. at the Orange Town Hall, 617 Orange Center Road, the Orange Town Plan and Zoning Commission will conduct a public hearing on the following: petition to amend the Orange zoning regulations submitted by DGM Partners, Rye LLC, and Orange Improvements Partnership, to amend Article 7, Section 383-47 and Section 383-143.9 of the Orange zoning regulations regarding maximum ground coverage for LI uses in the C1 zone. Petition to amend the Orange zoning regulations submitted by Commonwealth Newington LLC and Estate of Helen Cunningham to amend Article 12, Sections 383-97, 383-100, 383-101, 383-102, 383-103, 383-104, and Article 18, Section 383-174 of the Orange zoning regulations. A copy of this notice has been filed in the Orange Town Clerk. Additional information is on file in the Orange Zoning Department, dated in Orange, Connecticut, the 7th day of November, 2023. Paul Kaplan, Secretary.
Okay, thank you, Judy. All right, so first hearing, public hearing, is on the petition to amend the regulations, specifically sections 383-47 and 383-143-9. Is the applicant ready to proceed?
We are, Mr. Chairman, thank you. For the record, John Nuff, with an office at 135 Broad Street in Milford, here tonight on behalf of GGM Partners, Rye LLC, and Orange Improvements Partnership. First of all, I want to extend our appreciation to all the commission members for coming out on a rather unpleasant evening 2 days before Thanksgiving. So we very much appreciate your attendance, and if I don't get a chance to wish you a happy Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you.
So,
Could you spell your last name for me, please?
yes, Nuff, K-N-U-F-F.
Thank you.
So the applicants own the property at 80 Boston Post Road. As you know, it's located in a C1 zone. We're bordered not only on Boston Post Road, but Bull Hill Lane on the southwest and Carlson Road on the southeast. And we have Amazon and a new truck trailer parking located to our northeast. And on the other side of Carlson Road, the property is zoned LI1. So our immediate area is very much consistent with the larger area of this portion of town, where there's a retail commercial corridor along Route 1 with LI1 or LI2 behind that commercial corridor. You know, some towns that are now embracing form-based codes are talking about first layers and second layers. So that's essentially what you have on the south side of Boston Post Road. You have a first layer of commercial retail and a second layer of industrial. As you recall, this past summer, you approved a regulation amendment to the C1 regulations that acknowledged quite frankly, the seismic shift in the marketplace away from bricks and mortar retail to industrial uses, while also ensuring the integrity of the retail commercial corridor on Boston Post Road. Specifically, you permitted a limited number of light industrial uses to be located only in the rear of a C1 parcel under very specific conditions, and thereby maintain the retail corridor along Route 1. Fundamentally, it was extending to one site because of its unusually large size, what had already occurred throughout this area of town. So as a quick reminder of what you did last July. You added manufacturing, warehouse, and wholesale, laboratories, and freight and trucking as special uses. You limited that to sites on a minimum of 10 acres that had 3 front yards, abutting an LI1 zone, and perhaps the most important provision was that any light industrial use must be 250 feet from Boston Post Road, and I think that acknowledges the fact that there's no other parcel in the C1 zone that has the size and the depth from Boston Post Road as 80 Boston Post Road does. So as a result of that amendment, there's been much greater interest in the property, but there's still one stumbling block, and that is the maximum ground coverage of 25% in the C1 zone. Candidly, this is probably an oversight on our part that back in July, or back in June when we first proposed this regulation amendment, we did not seek to amend the maximum ground coverage. Currently, the site exceeds the maximum ground coverage in the C1 zone of 25%. So in order to attract an industrial user, we would have to do one of two things. We would either have to reduce the amount of commercial and retail along the corridor, but that would sort of work against you in terms of maintaining that first layer of retail and commercial with the industrial behind it, or we would just, we would have much more difficult time attracting a user. So our new amendment proposes to increase the maximum ground coverage to 35% in the C1 zone that has a light industrial use, and that's less than the 40% maximum ground coverage that's permitted in the LI1 and LI2 zone. So it seeks to strike a balance between the C1 and the C2. That results in a difference of approximately 90,000 square feet in building coverage, which obviously would have a substantial impact from a real property tax perspective. We consider this to be a rather modest modification with a significant upside. We do have one potential tenant who does require a greater ground coverage than what we currently have, even as a non-conformity of 27%. It's not to say that if you approve the regulation amendment this evening, that they would definitely come, but if this application were to be denied, then obviously we would lose them as a potential tenant. So, I mean, that's the sum total of our request. I think it's very straightforward. With me is Jack Rosenkrantz, who I think you've met before. He's the Vice President of Redevelopment at DLC. We have Art Ross in the audience, who's the Executive Managing Director of Newmark, Brad Sewells, who is a Managing Director of Newmark, and both of them are market experts when it comes to the leasing and sale of industrial properties. Happy to answer any questions. As I said, very straightforward, tries to strike a balance between the 25% building coverage in the C1 and the 40% in the LI1. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, gee, what would happen if years from now you wanted to convert an industrial building to retail? Candidly, we can never park for it because the parking requirements are far different. And obviously, a retail use would never be able to utilize a building that was designed for industrial purposes. So you open the door to greater economic development with a use that would be shielded by retail and commercial, frankly, with no downside, and obviously improves DLC's opportunity to bring an important new user to the town of Orange.
So, Attorney Nuff, I think you hit on the point of the ground coverage as written, in that in the C1 zone, the 25% building ground coverage meshes up with the parking ratios allocated to commercial and the open space requirements.
Right.
So it all the math works.
Right.
Whereas in the-
And by the way, just to be clear, in the C1 zone, you have a number of permitted uses, site plan uses. All the light industrial uses that we propose are special permit uses or special, you call them special use permits. So you would have obviously an opportunity to, to scrutinize any new application that would be coming before you.
Correct, but if the language, so when you say you're trying to strike a balance between if it was a straight industrial use on a single parcel, then the 40% is appropriate because of the reduced parking requirements, but you still need the truck maneuvering and all the rest.
Right, but keep in mind that this is a building coverage requirement, not a impervious coverage requirement.
I understand, but I think that since this is a site that is going to be a hybrid and have a ratio of industrial to commercial as yet undetermined until an application comes in, that maybe, rather than just have a blanket 35% coverage, that it be, language saying up to, meaning that if it's more appropriate that the coverage is 30% to maintain the correct ratio,
If you wanted to add the words up to 35%, I don't think that we would have any objection to that whatsoever.
Yeah, as long as you can get to the 35%.
Candidly, we're trying to, as I said, increase the opportunity for adding industrial use while maintaining as much of the retail, commercial, restaurant uses on the site. And which I think is a good thing because those are, in Norwalk, they call liner buildings. It's the retail buildings that are set out closer to the street, and then you have other buildings such as industrial, which are very familiar with because of all the other industrial uses in town, that would be located further from Route 1 and shielded by those other retail, restaurant, commercial uses.
Well, and that commercial corridor along Route 1 has a synergistic effect with all the other commercial uses on Route 1, and that is another reason that we seek to maintain it. But once you, as we discussed when the amendment was previously, the language was previously amended, once you've reached a certain depth, that's no longer necessary, and the uses can relate to the LI zone.
Right, but I think what would typically happen, what's most likely to happen, given the challenges of retail, is that if we had to remain at 25%, if we went to 30%, the industrial use would still come, and you would just end up losing more commercial restaurant retail space. And I don't think that's what you want either.
When you say.
I guess I don't see a downside.
Yeah, no, when you say strike a balance, do you mean you view it as a good transitional measure? Transitioning from the resident, from the commercial use to the industrial use?
Correct. So as I said, C1 is 25% coverage. The LI1 and LI2 is 40%.
And this is-
35% seems appropriate. And that, candidly, that's what the tenants that DLC and the Newmar folks are hearing from the marketplace, which is they need to be bigger than 25, or even if we were able to maintain the nonconformity of 27%. And I don't know, we can get into the legal weeds about whether we can maintain that nonconformity if we're taking down some portions of the building. It just doesn't result in what we need to do. So that's the challenge. And as I said, shame on us for not having, thought this through better back in the summer. But, as I said, hearing from the marketplace and after looking at this more carefully, this is an important change for us.
Yeah, having approved the amendments earlier, and knowing that the previous amendments are such that they only apply to this one particular parcel. There are there's no other property in Orange that would be eligible. it's hard for me to get too excited about it, the way I feel, you know, it's hard for me to envision what 25% coverage is, you know, versus 35%. I don't know, is that more noticeable on a larger site or less noticeable? I don't, you know, I don't have a feel for that.
Certainly noticeable from a tax valuation perspective.
Yeah.
It's 100,000 feet on 10 acres.
Yeah, I calculated around 90, but, you know,
Oh,
I'm not going
sorry.
to quibble over
No,
10,000 square
I-
feet.
I was guessing. So,
All right.
So you're talking about 2 acres of building, and,
Right.
I mean, it's a sea of asphalt. Do you care if it's asphalt or a building? You know?
No, well, I mean, I guess I'd be a little bit more nervous if we were talking about setback requirements. Or height, or anything, you know, like that, but, I don't know, this doesn't get me too.
Sorry,
Well,
attorney?
you know, here's the important thing. The most important setback requirement is the 250 feet from Boston Post Road. If you look at who else is surrounding us, we have industrial across the street, we have Amazon and a tractor trailer parking lot next to us. I mean, so we're literally impacting nobody.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very isolated. Do you anticipate an LI use?
We certainly hope so, yes,
Okay.
correct.
I mean, it would have been nice back in the summer when we did the amendment that we thought about coverage and tied it more to what LA is. but,
Agreed. And
I don't really see a downside, given that it's kind of a hidden parcel, it's unique.
It's also one of the special standards of the special permit exception.
All right, any other questions for the applicant?
That I would agree with Kevin, and we would do up to 35, because then
Yeah.
if somebody wants 30, that's fine
I
too.
don't see any, you know, legal
Yeah, just have a max.
difference. All right, is there, do we have any further are you all set, John?
we're all set if you are.
Okay, any further questions for the applicant? All right. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to comment on the application, ask any questions of the applicant? Everybody's here on the next item. All right. Then at this point, let's decide whether we can close the public hearing or not. Are we in need of any other information in order to decide?
So just a general question, you know, Paul was very involved in the, you know, original language. Would we need to keep the, you know,
You want him to
Well,
weigh in.
yeah, would it be okay to keep it open until, for
I
2
don't see
weeks?
why
I mean,
not.
when's our next
I
meeting?
mean, we could close the public hearing and still,
And he could still be involved?
As
Yeah.
long as
He
he
has to watch
watches
the
the
meeting.
recording and puts that on the record.
Oh, okay. I mean, we have a meeting like December
Fifth.
5th?
Fifth.
I have no objection to keeping it open for the next meeting.
Up to you.
Uh,
If we're gonna keep it till the next meeting, we might as well keep the public
Public
hearing
hearing
portion
open.
open.
Yeah,
Right.
right, I mean, right, there's only a downside to closing the public hearing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a very straightforward detail that would have been easy to overlook in the initial text change. And, you know, once you start dealing with real people and real needs and
Correct.
running that math against an actual site, you know, things can sometimes happen in this like two-stage manner. So I think as Attorney Nuff said, I think, protecting the commercial corridor and then transitioning into the LI district that we already approved, if this makes that work, you know, we should,
Yeah,
look at it.
yeah, again, I mean, to me, this is easy, having are much easier, having already approved the amendments that we approved back in July, right? But if we want to keep the public hearing open to hear what Paul has to say about it, I'm happy to do that. We can certainly do that.
You know, the other alternative is to wait for Mr. Kaplan to vote. Everyone else who is here in attendance is going to be in New York at ICSC, which is a big, obviously, retail developer conference. So I'm just throwing that out there for your consideration. But I will be here under,
Yeah.
in either event.
Is there are no, there's no input that we need from municipal department heads?
No, this is, because it's just a text change.
And you don't have to send it back to SCOG like or whatever?
No, they've already reviewed it. If we play around with one or two words in it, it does not have to go back for re-review.
Okay.
All right, well, let's do that. Let's leave the public hearing open and
We'll try not to sandbag you
and
while you're
we'll
gone.
wrap this up.
Everyone's planning on being around.
So Jack has another personal consideration, but the fact that his wife is going to have twins very shortly, but again, I will be here and I can certainly pass along to Jack and his new two sons, I think, what the result of the vote is.
Well, if you're willing to name them Ozzy and Paul.
I was thinking Kevin and Tom. All right, well, I mean, we don't need the applicant,
Okay, no, understood, okay.
you know.
You good?
for-
Okay.
For the next meeting. Let's do that. Let's keep the public hearing open and, again, we'll wrap this up next meeting.
Okay, thank you very
Okay.
much.
All right, thank you. Good luck with
Good luck.
the babies. And happy Thanksgiving. All right. All right, next item on our agenda is a petition to amend the Orange zoning regulations. This one is submitted by Commonwealth Newington LLC and the estate of Helen Cunningham. And it's a petition to amend various sections as they relate to our PRD regulations. Is the applicant?
I am, Mr. Chairman. I'm just gonna hand out some materials. Jack, do you take the full record, or does this?
Yeah, whatever you're gonna hand out.
Okay. And I'll explain what it is that I've handed out.
Okay.
Jack, I have an extra copy for Mr. Kaplan if you have to.
Yeah, that's what for. Thank you.
All right, so for the record, my name is John Nuff. I have an office at 135 Broad Street, and I'm here tonight on behalf of Commonwealth Newington LLC as the applicant and contract purchaser, and I'm also representing the estate of Helen Cunningham, who is the owner of the property located at 271 Peck Lane. I've just handed out for the record a couple different documents. One is entitled Multifamily Developments for which members of Commonwealth Newington have held ownership interests. I've also handed out another copy of the application itself, as well as the regulation amendment. I've handed you a reduced size copy of the concept plan, and then also I provided you the shortened version of the traffic impact study. I've given Jack the full traffic study with all the appendices. We think traffic is probably not going to be a paramount issue this evening, at least. But nonetheless, we wanted, traffic is always a concern, and certainly it's a question whenever there's a regulation amendment, so we wanted to address that. But our traffic engineer is down the street in Milford this evening, and so he cannot be with us. But the sum total is that our regulation amendment will not result in any negative traffic conditions in the area. So this is an application to amend your planned residential development regulations. With me this evening are the two principals of the applicant, Greg Patchen and Arslan Altoff, who both together and individually have developed dozens of various types of projects throughout the state, including in West Hartford and Canton. And the first handout that I gave you have representative imagery of various projects that they have developed. And I think you'll find that they are very attractive, modestly sized, and something that any town could be proud of. And so their goal and our goal is to work with the town and this commission to bring the same high level of design to the property at 271 Peck Lane by utilizing the PRD process. The PRD regulations include a number of provisions that strictly limit the location of parcels that can utilize this process. So here's some of the requirements that are in the PRD zone currently. It has to be greater than 2 acres and less than 5 acres. It has to be served by sewer. In our case, we have a WPCA approval. If it's in a commercial zone, it has to be located south of Boston Post Road. If it's in a residential zone, it must have direct access to Peck Lane or Old Lambert Road. But, and here's an important but, it must also be more than 300 feet from another PRD parcel and must be 200 feet from a non-residential parking lot or non-residential building. And that's frankly the part that to me is the most confusing, because why would anyone care if a developer wants to locate a multifamily building on a parcel adjacent to a commercial building or commercial parking lots, why the zoning regulations would have any concern about that. But nonetheless, that's what's in your requirement. So the result is there is no undeveloped parcel in the town of Orange that complies with all the PRD requirements. There is not one that is undeveloped currently. There are some along in the commercial zone on the south side of Boston Post Road, but all of those are developed. And so that's the purpose of these regulation amendments, is to iron out some of the inconsistencies in the regulations and make the PRD regulations more relevant. Nevertheless, if the proposed amendments are approved, there's only 2 parcels that could satisfy the new requirements, which are currently undeveloped. 271 Peck Lane, and assuming they were able to connect to the sewers, 251 Old Lambert Road. So our proposed amendment has extremely limited applicability. So before we go through the specifics of the request, the end goal is to enable the development of a single attractive building with a total of 75 one-bedroom units behind the retail plaza at 538 Boston Post Road, while also protecting the 8 or so residential neighbors that we have that directly abut us. And I think we all know that multifamily communities help provide housing alternatives for a variety of people, including seniors looking to downsize while remaining in their community, young professionals who can help maintain the market for single-family homes as they decide to have families of their own, and the newly single who want to remain close to their families. And I think you probably know, newly single is a euphemism for those who are divorced, but there are those in everyone's community, and so oftentimes they're looking for alternative housing as well. So with that, I would ask you to turn to the actual regulation amendment that we submitted. It is on page 5 of the handouts, and everything else that I reference is there's references to your POCD and your housing study, and the as well as the description of the proposed changes. But I think it'd be helpful to actually walk you through the various changes that we're proposing. So the first is in 383-97, and that is the purpose. You have a requirement that any multifamily community in our PRD zone have a minimum of 30% of affordable. Well, that is the definition of an 8-30G development. So there's really no benefit to be derived by having a 30% affordability requirement, because you could just submit an affordable housing application, and that's not what our goal is. That's not what we want to do. So we're proposing to modify the PRD regulations to reduce the required amount of affordable housing from 30% to 5%.
Now, John, you're aware of the pressure from Hartford that every community in the state of Connecticut is having to supply affordable housing units to residents.
Understood.
This is counterintuitive to that movement.
Well, here's what I would respond. As I said at the beginning, our goal was to work with the community, work with this commission, and work with the town. If there was an appetite to do a higher percentage of affordable, we're happy to discuss that. We're frankly, we're trying to strike we're trying to strike a balance of what is economically feasible, but also, is consistent with what the town desires. So yes, we understand that, Orange, as well as every other community in Connecticut, is under these pressures, and with everything that's on the table, we're happy to work with you, happy to discuss it with you, and hopefully come to some amicable resolution.
Okay.
So that's the first proposed change.
I mean, it's hard to, you read the first sentence, and it says, the purpose of the PRD is to encourage the provision of affordable housing. Then you read the next sentence that you're asking us to change.
Right. Well, I guess part of it is there's
It's hard to know, hard to see how that would,
Be consistent.
be
with the
consistent.
objective.
no, well, affordable can be affordable under state statute. It also could be affordable as less expensive than a single-family home. I think there is such a thing as a lowercase a affordable residential. As I said, we're happy to
You have
discuss.
some insight on that as to which A this is?
Yeah, so, I mean, so this community would provide both. It would provide a percentage of units that would meet the criteria for, as affordable under the state statute, but it also, as I said, would provide for housing alternatives at a price point for a one-bedroom rental unit that obviously would cost less per month than a mortgage on a single-family home. So there is a recognition in the planning community that there are two different types of affordable units. One that meets the standard and ones that don't, but just simply less expensive than other housing alternatives in that community.
Okay.
Okay, so the next change would be in 383-100C. It says a maximum 5 acres on any one parcel may be used for housing. And there must be a 300-foot separation between parcels containing PRD units. Well, directly across the street from the Peck Lane property is Spruce Manor, and that is a 62 or older development. And so we propose to make the change that you could be closer than 300 feet if the PRD unit that is within 300 feet is senior housing. No more than 50 units may be built on any one qualifying site, and we are proposing to add, except that up to 75 units shall be permitted within our PRD in which 100% of the dwelling units are efficiency or one-bedroom units. So right now, you could have 50 units, each with 2 bedrooms, and so obviously, even I can do the math, that's 100 bedrooms. In our case, we would be limiting ourselves to 75 one-bedroom units, and so therefore a maximum of 75 bedrooms. The next change on the next page is 383-101, planning and design standards. The maximum building floor area to site area ratio, FAR, shall not exceed 30%. We're proposing 50%. I guess, I never really understood the purpose of a maximum floor area ratio. If you comply with all other bulk requirements, setback, heights, impervious coverage, all those things, then the FAR has to be consistent with those. What this requirement is saying is that you can build a building with a certain footprint, but the next second or third floors have to be smaller than what is on the first floor, which, no one does. So I guess it makes sense if you were building a high-rise in New York or someplace like that, and you wanted to minimize shadowing and you wanted to create, mandate setbacks, then I think a floor area ratio makes sense. But I think in this context, where you're looking at a relatively low building heights, having an FAR of 30% just doesn't make sense. I don't know what the origin of this was, and maybe, not a lot of thought was put into it at the time. But that's the change, from 30% to 50%. The next two are the building setbacks, and these are the ones I mentioned that confuse me, because Currently, residential dwelling units may not be located within 200 feet of a non-residential building or non-residential parking lots. And then B is residential dwelling units may not be located within 100 feet of a non-residential building located in a shopping complex of 75,000 square feet or more. So, there seems to be a considerable amount of overlap between those two provisions. But again, I guess I just don't see the purpose of those. If someone's willing to build and someone's willing to live in a building that is adjacent to a commercial building, and let's face it, as we drive around Milford and this area and up to Branford, we see lots of different housing developments. They're located in direct proximity to commercial uses. And so while that may have been the standard some years ago, I think there are others who obviously, find that not to be, an offensive or unpleasant way to live. There's lots of multifamily communities that are located in direct proximity to commercial uses, including large retail developments.
It just seems to me the theme of the proposed amendments to our PRD is to cram more units on a 5-acre parcel. You want us to reduce the affordable component, go from 200 feet to 75, 100 feet to 50 feet, increase the number of units allowed, and increase our FAR from 30 to 50. I don't think the PRDs are that poorly written. We've had projects be approved under them.
Well, I guess I would respectfully disagree with the word cram. What I would say is that it makes them relevant again to, the available parcels. Because, as I said, there are so few parcels that can meet all those different criteria that we're simply trying to modify those things that are just an absolute prohibition to any use of this property. I mean, we have maps that we developed that show every parcel that complies with all these requirements, and there is not one that is undeveloped that can comply with all these requirements. And so if there actually is a goal to provide some affordable housing, if there's a goal to utilize the PRD regulations, these are the sorts of things that are, insurmountable hurdles, frankly, that we're trying to overcome. As I said, we're happy to have a discussion with you about them, but I think some perhaps might make sense. I don't think that, for instance, the requirements in 383-101B, 1A and 1B, are entirely relevant.
Maybe at that time we were thinking quality of life. Let's have some space between a commercial and a residential.
No,
Maybe that was the concept, some aesthetics, behind those regs.
No, understood. And as I said, at the time that these were, I think, amended in 2000 or so, I think we all would agree. I will confess that I have seen, in fact, I have represented projects where I have looked at them and said, who would want to live here? And sure enough, they get built and they get fully tenanted in a matter of weeks. Exit 36 for MetroStar, exit 55 in Branford, right next to the highway for MetroStar. There's so many, and I'm just like, okay, so clearly, I'm not in the market for that type of community, but there are many others who are, and so we're just trying to create that opportunity. In 383-101B2, we're suggesting a modification to the landscape buffer. So while we're reducing it from 25 feet to 20 feet, we're also making it more relevant and make it more effective in terms of requiring evergreen trees at least 5 feet in height on any portion of the property that abuts a residential property. 383-102, building standards. Building walls that exceed 160 feet in length shall include facade articulation. Right now, you have a limitation of 160 feet. A modification to the number of parking spaces, so it's in accordance with the recent state statutes. And again, the other changes in terms of the landscaping to make sure that we are providing a meaningful screening and not just a landscape buffer. So those are the changes. The other thing that I've handed out to you is, so let's see what this means as a practical matter on this property. And so this is the other hand I gave you, a reduced, so it's this plan that I've handed out. So I think what's important here is a couple of things. One is that, just to orient you, north is to the top of the page, and that is where Raymore and Flanagan is located. Peck Lane is to the west. That is our sole means of ingress and egress into the site. So any traffic to or from our property would not be going past any residential neighbors. And then you're seeing the screening around the perimeter to buffer the building and any parking from any of our nearby neighbors. And as you can see, most of the immediately abutting residential neighbors would be abutting the parking lot and not the building itself.
I'm still having trouble getting oriented here. Where's Trader Joe's with respect to this?
Well, so to the north is Boston Post Road. So to the page north, top of the page. So Raymore and Flanagan is where it says proposed retaining wall. That's where Raymore and Flanagan is located.
Okay.
Ozzy, it would be right over here, upper left, basically, be Trader Joe's.
Okay.
So this is only a regulation amendment, of course, but this is what the result would be. And I can also show you an elevation that my clients have asked an architect to draw up. So you can see that it's going to be a very attractive building. But this is I think a fairly modest-sized building located further away from any residential neighbors. There is obviously very heavy commercial retail immediately proximate to this. And one of your goals of your POCD is to create a transition area between commercial and single-family residential. And I think multifamily is a perfect transition between those two uses.
Did you apply our current regs to this project, and how many units would that generate?
Your current regs only permit 50 units. So obviously, that would result, assuming we can overcome some of those other hurdles, we'd have a maximum of 50 units. Again, we try to make up for that by making those all one-bedroom units, to the extent that there's a concern about school-aged children, and I think all the data that has come out for the past couple of years that school-aged children typically do not live in multifamily communities, but to the extent that that was a concern, that was the point, was that to minimize any likelihood of that by making them all one-bedrooms. Let me grab the elevation. So I'm sorry, I guess I can't really use the window, so let me try my best. So this is sort of just a schematic elevation that my clients asked the architect to put together. And it's designed to be a very attractive structure that would, as I said, transition nicely between the commercial uses along Route 1 and the single-family residential units that are located adjacent to the property. I also gave you other examples of other imagery that my clients have developed. Again, very attractive colonial shingle-style buildings. I know I've given you a lot to digest, and I'm happy to answer questions or hear your thoughts, but again, I think it's really important to understand the attitude and approach my clients have taken, which is we want to do something that the town can be proud of. We're here to work with you. We want to hear your thoughts. But these are things that simply make this property developable, because any one of those things that we're seeking to change would prohibit or make very difficult any development of the property.
John, did you say before that there are no other undeveloped parcels
Right,
in Orange that could qualify for PRD?
So here is, and I think, Luke, do we have a full-size version of this? This is the map that shows all the. Okay, I'm sorry. I tried to print these, but when they printed, I was using up all of our color prints, but, so all the yellow was not coming out, so I don't have a copy for each of you, but I'll put this for the record. This is a map that our professional engineer, Luke Sofair, created, which is a indication of all the parcels that are susceptible of a PRD development under your existing regulations. These meet the requirements of greater than 2 acres, less than 5 acres. Commercial properties are located south of Boston Post Road. Residential properties are on Peck Lane, or I think there's one other.
Old Lambert
So-
Road.
Old Lambert, are located within the sewer district and are not located within the distance requirements to a commercial property.
So there are properties that would be eligible.
Right, so I want to be clear what I said. It's important to me that you know that I'm not trying to misrepresent
Right.
anything. So these properties are all currently developed. So that was the point I was trying to make. There's
So-
no.
But change of use, I mean, if they were to go out of business, then a PRD could come in.
Yes, yeah, no, I'm not trying to say otherwise.
No, what I thought I heard, what I thought I heard you say, and just the way I heard it, was that there are no other parcels in Orange that could meet all of the requirements at this point.
No other undeveloped parcels.
Undeveloped parcels.
Yes.
Okay. Of course, that doesn't rule out the possibility of an assemblage of parcels.
Doesn't rule out assemblage of parcels, correct.
Or redevelop.
Or
Right.
redeveloped.
Was Carol Martin's project in a PRD zone?
No, they created their own zone, if you remember, the Assisted Housing District.
Right, okay.
So I wasn't here when we approved anything under the PRD. So when you
Neither
look
was I.
at section, oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, these regulations date back,
I haven't seen anything
Yeah.
under the PRD either.
All right, so, for example, 383-100, Section B says there will be a maximum of 350 housing units authorized in accordance with this article from January 1992 till December 2005. So we haven't had to look at this for a while, if that language is still in here, right?
Right, and that's really the point. Nothing's happened under this regulation. And
For a
it's-
while.
And that's all we're trying to do, is loosen some of the restrictions so something can happen.
So, and with respect to the FAR, the impact is that under a .3 FAR, you're allowed to develop 13,000 and change square feet of building per acre. And under 50, you'd be able to develop 21,000 and change square feet of building per acre. So on a 3-acre size, the building goes from 40,000 feet to 63 or something and change on a 3-story building.
okay.
I'm trying to understand some of the nomenclature in the suggested language. Are you also suggesting eliminating the minimum size requirements for apartments?
The state legislature has already done so.
Okay. So currently, it's your position that the requirement of the minimum floor area for units for single-bedroom studios and 2 bedrooms is no longer allowed under the
Well,
Connecticut
floor
General-
area ratio is a different metric, But in terms of the minimum square footage per unit, the state legislature has prohibited that, because, you know, if you were, I don't know, let's pick a town out of the air, Darien, for instance, and said a multifamily unit, a one-bedroom, a one-bedroom unit in the town of Darien must be a minimum of 2,000 square feet. Well, guess what? No one's gonna be building a 2,000 square foot single, you know, but that would be a way that a town such as Darien, I'm not picking on them, could preclude any multifamily developments. So the legislature, in their wisdom, eliminated the ability to mandate a minimum square footage. We may take issue with how the state legislature did such things, but again, it's all in the effort of providing more affordable housing, even if that means smaller unit sizes.
Probably around the same time, maybe all those housing changes, just like they changed the parking.
Yeah.
Sorry. In the last year, if everyone remembers, when Attorney Marino came in and kind of walked us through a lot of the state legislation changes, that about halfway through last year, they touched on unit sizes, but also parking requirements that
Right.
municipalities can have for these kinds of developments.
You know-
Basically took a lot of the authority away from the municipalities and said, this is what you're working with now.
Right, so in the handout on page 3, there's a footnote 2, that references the Public Act. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
all the location criteria seems to point an applicant to certain areas in town. It says, okay, we need to look at off of Peck Lane, we need to be south of Boston Post Road, we need to be a certain parcel size. So, okay, we're checking a lot of those boxes, need to have sewer, we got sewer, we checked that box. And then you have these other requirements that frankly are head scratching, you know? And I understand Commissioner Smith's concern or comment that maybe at the time we wanted to make sure that there was a quality of life for people living, you know, in close proximity to a commercial use. I think that if an applicant and tenants choose to build and move into that type of facility, then they should have that opportunity. I guess the existing PRD regs open a door, and then other provisions within it just slam that door shut. We're just trying to nudge it open a little bit.
And that's what you would argue is the positive impact this has for the town of Orange.
Correct.
I mean, obviously,
I
it
mean-
has
I
a
mean,
positive impact for the applicant.
No, so take a look at page 4 and what your own POCD says in terms of providing the transition between using multifamily projects as a transitional use that supports the goal of creating that transition between commercial and residential areas. You talk about housing needs of an aging population. You know, the one thing that you hear all the time is people want to, you know, they want to downsize, move out of a single-family home, but they don't want to move to a different town. They want to maintain their connections to their church, to the places that they shop, to their neighbors, to their family. And currently, there's not a lot of opportunities for people in Orange to do that. You know, you're also, by providing multifamily, you're providing a sort of a queue of potential buyers of the single-family home. So it's at the same time as someone can choose to sell their single-family home to move into an apartment, that you're also creating an opportunity for people who, you know, who are in their 30s, for instance, who choose to, you know, marry or settle down and say, you know what, we're having our first child. We really like the town of Orange, let's go buy a house. So you're creating a market for that as well. As I said, there's always, you know, multifamily communities are also for the newly single, as they say. You know, people, like, family gets divorced, presumably the father wants to remain close to the kids, well, you're probably looking for an apartment in the town where he's close to his children so he can remain a part of their lives. Those are the prototypical examples of people who move into multifamily communities. And I think all those things are good things. You know, to the extent that there's people moving in, downsizing, you're looking at people who have disposable income, who are going to be, they're not going to spend every dime of their disposable income in the town of Orange, but they're going to spend some of it.
How would the map that you showed us of eligible properties change if these amendments were approved?
Well,
That's another way to look at it, yeah.
we had Luke do that as well. So I'll hand you this one as well. So the only other property that would become eligible, and they don't have sewer, is 251 Old Lambert Road. And they're also proximate to the commercial uses, so,
That's an undeveloped,
I'm sorry,
that's an undeveloped parcel?
that is, I think there's some single-family
I
homes
believe
on
it's,
there.
it's a farm. There's a single-family property, it's the Foyer Farm.
Okay.
As I said, we're happy to discuss any of these metrics. If you want us to take a look at anything specific, we're more than happy to do that. We're here to work with you to, I know we put a lot before you on a regulation that you haven't looked at, maybe ever. And so we're, you know, if you have comments tonight, we're happy to go back and sketch anything out for you.
All right. Do we have any other questions for the applicant at this point? I'd like to open it up to the public. John, are you all set?
I'm all set for now.
All right. Okay, then. Does anyone in the audience, does anyone wish to speak to the application, ask any questions of the applicant? If yes, come to the podium, introduce yourself, and ask your question. Yep.
Hi, I'm Nancy Zelinski, and I live at 249 Peck Lane Rear.
Could you spell your last name for me, Nancy?
Z like zebra, ELINSKY like sky.
Thank you.
And so I have just a few questions here. How many acres are you developing here?
He'll answer, he'll do his best to answer when you're done. He has to, because he
Okay.
can't comment from the.
I understand,
yeah,
okay,
you
so
got it.
I'm wondering how many acres are under development in this proposal? I'm wondering if there's a survey on file with the town for this particular piece of property at 271 Peck Lane? Another thing is, he mentioned that he represents, Attorney Nuff represents the estate for Helen Cunningham. I'd like some clarification on that. That was not my understanding. I'd like to know, if you make this development, what provisions are you going to make for my private well that currently is a good well that I use to provide water to my house with? I don't have access to sewers. I don't have any property that's on a road that I can say, please hook me up to the sewer. The other thing that concerns me is developing of this property. You're going to be covering over existing watershed for the Indian Lake. I know from personal experience that when the original Wilco went in so many years ago, that was the first time my parents' house flooded. My folks lived on Indian River Road. I grew up there. I actually own that house now. So I'm wondering what provisions you're going to make to keep that water from going into the lake and providing more water to what we already have. We do have some issues at Indian Lake.
Just so you understand, you know, a lot of those questions you're asking would get answered at a point in time when, if we approve these proposed amendments, they came in with a site plan application. You know, they, demonstrated in great detail exactly what they intended to do on the property. But this is way preliminary to that. They can't possibly do this at all.
I just think that these things are
Without-
important
Yeah,
considerations.
no, no doubt, no doubt. But I just, just so you know, that this is not, an approval from us on this application doesn't mean this is gonna happen.
Okay. Another comment I have is, you're talking about affordable units, affordable housing. You want to reduce that from 30% to 5%, a 25% reduction. If the town's impetus to allow this is to meet criteria from the state for affordable housing, why does it make sense to reduce that on this particular parcel by 25%? And that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Sarah McGill at 278 Mallard Drive.
Could you spell your last name, please?
Sure, MC, capital G, I-double-L.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Just one point, it's mostly questions, but just one point of correction. Mallard Drive feeds into Peck Lane, and on a Friday evening, if you're trying to get out of Mallard Drive, you often just take a right and go off to the Boston Post Road instead of the left you intended, because there's just so much traffic on that road already. So I really doubt this wouldn't have an impact on traffic, because another 75 cars, not that they're all going to be leaving at the same time, but they don't all go to the Boston Post Road. Many people go down to Quarry Road and take the back roads. That's typically what I do. So I respectfully beg to disagree, just someone who lives there and sees the traffic. It does have an impact, and it's meaningful. And for older people who don't accelerate their car maybe the way I would, I mean, I'm old, but I'm not old enough not to accelerate my car, it really is scary for people to get out. So I would imagine it would also affect Claudia Drive and other roads like that as well. So anyway, questions. Just some questions about the height of the building. How tall will it actually be, especially in relation to the neighbors who are going to be surrounding? I mean, we wouldn't even see the building from where I live, but just the height of the building, it's hard to tell from the schematic, just how tall it would be, particularly if, I know sometimes with developments, people will elevate the landmass for whatever reason. I understand this property might be a little bit bumpy. If they're elevating the landmass, that may make the entire building higher than it would seem otherwise, because if it's X feet tall and you're making it 10 more feet tall, when you're next to a small suburban, these are mostly like split-level houses, that's really going to impact them. And I know you were saying who would want to live in these apartments, and you're thinking about who would move into them, but these apartments are moving into someone's neighborhood, and they're going to be looking at, even if they're lovely, these big, tall houses that are not the trees they see today from that property. The property today is a lovely transition from the shopping center to the residential area, because it's basically woods. It's just very quiet.
I think the height is 40, right?
Yeah, the
I
max.
think the applicant is not proposing,
40?
is not proposing change. It is 40.
It's 40?
And there's no, yeah, currently 40. And there's no proposed change to that.
Okay, so there's not proposal to, like, add more soil to elevate the house,
Well,
to get a
that
basement?
again, that would be done at a site
Yeah,
plan,
yeah.
like, this
Oh.
is a preliminary.
Got it, okay,
I mean,
got
we
it.
have a
that, but-
regulation that allows certain housing projects.
Okay,
They're asking to change certain characteristics.
I'll try to stick to the
Yeah,
brief,
that's all.
okay,
But
okay.
again,
Yeah.
people care about the site plan.
Yeah.
What's it gonna look like?
But
Right.
but to give you a comparable, if you went by the, the old Firelight, that's a 3-story building that's about 40 feet tall.
Okay, that's a great benchmark, okay.
That, just to give you a visual.
Yeah, no, that's
reference.
super
And
helpful.
what's the measurement is taken, I mean, what if you could build it up by 20 feet, and then if you had a 40, you can't do that, I mean, it's measured.
Well,
It's the mean, from mean grade.
Yeah, so
at
the way you
first
find the
floor.
height
Yeah.
is largely determined by the base height elevation. And if someone were to be, an applicant were to be looking to bring a large amount of material on site, that is another special permit that they would have to come in and get approved by that
Right.
board.
Okay,
So there, net, there are safeguards in place to assure that you're not gonna have a 60-foot,
The appearance of a.
Correct.
the
Yes.
appearance of a 60-foot building,
okay,
when only 40 feet is allowed.
got it, okay, that's super helpful. And I guess I'd also just say that I question the use of the word modest, because 300 feet long seems like a big building to me. I mean, our backyard's like 150 feet wide, and I always thought that was pretty big. 120 feet wide, 300 seems like a really big building, but again, I guess that's semantics, but it doesn't seem modest to me somehow. And I guess one last thing is, I love having kids around. I have no issue if there's a whole bunch of kids at that place, like, at all. Like, I don't see a problem with that. But I don't think it's fair to say there wouldn't be kids there, because what if that newly single person is the mom with kids and she can't afford the house? She's gonna move in there, and she will. I mean, I lived in a one-bedroom with 2 kids for a period of time, and we were fine. You know, so I don't think people are being realistic when they think there won't be kids. And again, I love kids, so that's not an issue for me, but I just think, you know, it's a little bit weird to say we wouldn't have families living there with children. And I think that's probably it. I think that's the main. All right. Sorry I'm not more organized. This is my first time at this rodeo.
Welcome
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Good evening. I am Edward Lisi, L-I-S-I. I live at 206 Margaret Lane, and I'm here as president of the Indian Lake Association. And I'm reiterating what Nancy said, and I realize it's early in the process, but this year we've had a heck of a time on Indian Lake. There was chlorine dumped in the lake upstream from us. We've been working with town engineer, with the inland wetlands, with the Water Pollution Control Authority, which I didn't even know we had in Orange, and the DEEP. And so we've been working at getting, it was over 2 months where the chlorine level was so high that we could not test the lake to tell our residents that it was okay to swim in it. Every time we brought tests to the lab and paid $250 to have the test done, we were told, sorry, we can't test these because the chlorine level is too high. We believe it was from some of the pool stores that are on the Post Road, and behind them are streams that lead into Indian Lake. So we are now at a point, and the DEP sent someone down, everyone was warned, all of a sudden it cleaned up. We can't point the finger at anyone, but we've had a lot of issues on Indian Lake. We're in the process of repairing our dam, so anything that adds more water to Indian Lake, and we know there's a lot of stuff going on upstream from us, and a small rainfall causes runoff that causes some of the properties to get flooded. Now, some of these properties are low, but still other properties get flooded. The lower part of my own property gets flooded. So we are just, I'm here to say, please be conscious of the fact that anything you do to develop a watershed area, to pave over parking lots, would cause, we want to make sure that the science is behind it so that it's not going to cause more damage to Indian Lake. On a personal note, I was in business, and now I teach at 2 universities, and I'm sitting here listening to all these changes that are being requested, and a reason for the change seems to be that, well, there's only 2 properties left that could apply, so all the rules that apply to all these other properties shouldn't apply to these 2. And I relate it to my students. They all take an exam. One student can't take the exam because they have to come later. And they come and they say, well, the rules applied to all those students, and I see the students back here, but I'm the last one to take the exam, so I should have double time to take the exam, or I should have open book to take the exam. So that's where my head is going when it's all these regulations. And so I just go back to, why are the regulations there? Why were they put in place? And do they apply now? Maybe they were put in place 50 years ago. But just because you're the last one to look to the regulations doesn't mean that the regulation shouldn't apply to you. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Ed.
you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Sherry Kuka, Kuka. I'm a new resident at Orange Indian River Road. I will refrain from repeating, but do share the same concerns as far as the water runoff into the lake. I do have some other questions aside from that. One is, some concerns and some questions. Questions include, will these proposed housing unit be rentals or condominium properties? Or will will it be open to both? I think that if it's possible that those turn into rentals, that would seriously affect lots of things in the community, including, the value of the housing in that area of Orange. Also, if they stay single units versus whether they eventually transition, single bedroom, or if later down the line they turn into multi-bedroom, therefore increasing, I'm all for more children also, of course, but I think there is a burden that it might put on the school system, which in turn also, causes downstream effects in Orange in general, as far as increasing class size burden in classrooms, and just also, again, relating that to just value of housing in Orange. So I think those were two questions. One, condominiums or rentals. Two, will they stay single bedroom, or is there a stipulation that eventually can turn into multiple bedrooms? Three, will there be elevators in this building, and is it open to all ages, or like you said, can it be 50? Is it 55 and over, or is it just open to everyone? That is, I think that if it was like a 55 and over building might add more value, I think, versus something that can be rented to everyone. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening.
Good evening, Jim.
Jim Zioli, 617 Orange Center Road, or 177 Old Tavern Road, or 621 Lambert Road, take your pick. We've met with this developer several times as he's tried to work through this process. But many of the things I heard tonight presented by Attorney Nuff on this application are only for the benefit of the developer. They're not for the benefit of the town of Orange. The town of Orange is doing just fine. And your job as a commission isn't to worry about the developer. Your job is to worry about Orange and keep Orange orange. I think we all know that. While I was sitting back there listening, there's people that talk about downsizing, and this was a very hot topic through the election that just passed, and I know all of you that were up for it heard it, and as did I. It was a debate question and all, and I stated it very clearly then, and I will now. It is no cheaper for the seniors to sell their house and move to an apartment where they'll be paying $2,000 to $3,000 plus or minus a month, when they already, if they own their home, they can maintain that property for far less than $20,000 or $30,000. So that's a misnomer that has said, when they put the affordable housing regulations in, and I think you'll all remember this, they put it in and they tried to say, well, we're doing this so the firemen and the police and the teachers and people like, in that job level, as they put it, have a place to live within their community. Well, do any of you ever pay attention to those lists? And when I say that, I mean all you out there as well as the commission. Those lists, the reporters call every year or 2 years, and they ask for the list of your top earners of your community. Orange gets it every couple of years. And the reporter, after they got the list, it cracked me up. Well, your first selectman's not on this list. No, he's number 32. He didn't make the 25 or the 30. But then when you add the Board of Education to it, as well as your other town people, and when it was just the town side, out of 25 or 30, I think 28 were police. Once you add the Board of Education to it, I moved down to like position 38 or 39. So, I mean, where that whole game started with the affordable thing years ago is out the window. That just doesn't work. This is strictly an issue for a developer to buy a piece of land and wiggle it to the best of their ability for them to make it work for them. Not for the town of Orange, not for residents that may decide to downsize and move there. So don't fall for that. To want to reduce the affordable percentage from 30% to 5%, why bother to even have any? I mean, even Fieldstone Village is 10%. Many of you may not even know that. 10% of the 142 units, I think, at Fieldstone. Many people don't know that. So 5% is nothing. The setbacks that were questioned to be reduced were put there by the commercial zones because we've had multiple over the years noise complaints between the residents that live in some of the existing places and stores. One of those being, the perfect example is actually right across the street was Trader Joe's. They have no storage capacity there. They get at least 2 tractor trailers a day. And the people who live in the apartments next door to it were calling here repeatedly, and we had to come out with some agreements with Trader Joe's as to when the tractor trailers would come over there because it was disturbing to the residents who live next door. So that's why you have that large setback on that sideline from Raymore and Flanagan. It's not because it's a penalty, it's a noise concern. Jack, you would be getting all kinds of calls that you'd have to deal with, and then what do you do with it once you've given into it? So that's the reason for that. Comparisons. The town of Orange owns a apartment building down there on Red Cedar Road. It's 45 apartments on approximately a 4 to 5 acre parcel. And that's a pretty big building. If you want to see what I think it was Miss McGill asked, I think it's about 300 feet. Take a ride over there and look at that building and you'll understand size. And that's 45 apartments, not 75. The apartments that are just being almost completed now at Firelight Shopping Center, where the strip mall was, is 73, 72 apartments in that building. So this is 3 more apartments than that building that's being built right now over at Firelight, if you want to do a size comparison. I think that's kind of important. We had about a 5 acre parcel on Smith Farm Road that a local person who actually lives right here in town is developing, and it's a fully affordable project. It's 46 units, and it's in 6 buildings, I believe, on that site. Take a ride over there and look and see. That actually is a very nice, appealing project with 6 different buildings and a community center building right in the middle of it. And that's 46 units on about 5 acres. So I don't know how big this parcel is exactly that is under consideration tonight, but it's 4 or 5 acres probably in total. So, you know.
3.3.
So, okay, how much?
3.3.
3.3. All right, so I asked the commission to consider those other buildings just for reference when you're gonna be looking at eliminating setbacks or reducing setbacks or minimizing these situations, because that's what you're gonna get. And if you need, I think the Firelight Shopping Center, the whole plaza over there is 6 and a fraction acres, as I recall. And this apartment building takes up a big piece of it, and there are people concerned with parking there. So I urge you to think about all of those. And, you know, you have to remember, those setbacks affect the neighbors. And, you know, it doesn't matter what type of building the developer built elsewhere, because that is not your charge or my charge. Our charge is to worry about the town of Orange, not about any of these other locations. Like I said, the developer that's building on Smith Farm Road has a vested interest in the town of Orange and is building in the town of Orange for the good of Orange, truly. She worked with us on that project. You know, I don't want us to turn into, as there were some comparisons, to Milford as far as housing. I like Milford, but I don't want to be a Milford where they're tear down a house or two in the middle of a street and they'll put 12 condominiums in over there, or where their zoning commission just came forward with some sort of a long-term approval for 750 apartments down in the part of the Milford Mall property. That is not Orange, and I don't anticipate it being Orange. If there's an affordable application comes forward out of this, we'll do what we do and do it properly, but it will have a 30% requirement on their side. So those are the things that you need to consider when all these changes, for not for the benefit of any one of us or the town, but for the benefit of the developer. And that parcel on Old Lambert Road does have sewer access. It's right there, absolutely right across the street from it. It runs through the woods from Old Lambert Road. It goes through the woods to Silverbrook Housing, and then it goes out to the pump station to the Post Road. And the reason I know that is it got blocked one night. A pipe broke over there in the woods, and I had no idea where the hell they were talking about, but I found out when I had to go down there and had a bad sewage spill out in the woods over there. So it's right across from the gate where you go in and out for the animals over there, just so you're aware of that also. So that's what I have to say on this project. I think there's an awful lot of requests for changes on this application. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone else who wishes to speak regarding the application? If not, we'll let Attorney Nuff respond. Hold on. Oh, he's, okay. Oh, yeah. Gotta get Kaplan to watch this. This meeting. John, do you want a 5-minute break, or?
Yeah, I think if we could, Mr. Chairman.
All right, why don't we stop for 5 minutes? Can we do that? We can do that,
We're
right?
off the record.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bigger picture. We're not here to argue with anybody, including First Selectman Zioli. As I said, we're here to be constructive and cooperative and work with you, work with our neighbors, work with First Selectman Zioli, for whom I have a great deal of respect. So I think that's important. There's no implicit threat. We just look at these regulations that says, okay, put it in this location, adjacent, off of Peck Lane. Well, what other property is close to Peck Lane that's in the sewer district other than us? Then to say you have to be located so many feet away from a shopping center. You can't reconcile those. So I guess that's the bigger picture. In terms of the neighborhood questions about specifics about the project itself, listen, I understand, I'm happy to answer those questions because I understand that, you all are new to this. And so, and I think you sort of understand now that we don't have a specific design yet, but I'll answer your questions and I'll be happy to answer them tonight. I'll be happy to answer them next week, not tomorrow, because my daughters are coming over for Thanksgiving, but, we don't want to shut the door to anybody, this commission, our neighbors, or the town administration. So in terms of how many acres the property is, it's about 3.3 acres. Whether there's a survey in file, candidly, I don't know. I'm sure a survey has been done. I don't know what that would mean, but certainly we would have to submit a survey as part of any special permit application. I represent the estate because they are an applicant, so I represent the applicants in this context. We would be on sewer and public water, so no implications to any private wells. We would have to comply with a myriad of stormwater requirements. And then as to the number of affordable units, why reduce it? I think I've indicated why we would do that, but again, we're also happy to have a discussion with the commission in terms of what that percentage should be. In terms of traffic, we submitted a traffic report. We would have to resubmit that for any special permit application. As I said, the data in the traffic report would have a very little impact on the nearby roadway network. We talked about the building height, school-aged children. Listen, I love kids. I think most towns are seeing a reduction in their school population. Nonetheless, a lot of towns often say, we're concerned about the addition of school-aged children, so we wanted to take that issue off the table. Yes, could someone have a child in a one-bedroom apartment? 100%. So not to say there will never be a kid living here, but we wanted to minimize that likelihood. In terms of a regulation change, and if I get your name wrong, Mr. Lizzie, I apologize. It's what happens, zoning was instituted in Connecticut in 1920-something. Let's face it, a lot of zoning regulations have modified over the years because times change. And I think these PRD regulations that were last modified in the year 2000, the time has come for them to be modernized and, as said, to iron out some of the inconsistencies. Runoff, again, same thing, we'll have to comply with the myriad of stormwater requirements. These will be rentals. I can't recall the last time anyone has constructed a new condominium project. They will be one bedrooms. They will stay that way. They're not 55 and older. They will be market rates. And I would respectfully disagree with First Selectman Zioli that this application is only intended for the benefit of the developer. Well, certainly no one's going to submit an application, any application, that is solely for the benefit of the town. But that's not to say that the two are inconsistent. It can be good for the developer, just like a developer builds a single-family home on a single-family lot. Well, guess what? The developer is going to make a few bucks. That's his or her living. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not to say that that's bad for the town. I don't think this is bad for the town. I think it could be good for the developer. I think it could be good for the town for all the reasons that I had indicated. First Selectman Zioli had mentioned about workforce housing. Well, that's not what we're proposing. I understand his point, but that's certainly not what we're proposing in terms of the number of affordable units. He mentioned 5%, Fieldstone's at 10%. I'll say it again. We're happy to talk to you about that. Size of the building, this is a very secluded parcel. I can understand there might be a concern about the appearance of it, but I think if you look at the concept plan, literally the only people who are going to be seeing this are the people who are going to be living there. We will create a buffer between that property and adjacent neighbors. The one long side is going to be facing Raymore and Flanagan. I don't think the folks who are going to be visiting the back of house at Raymore and Flanagan will care about an attractive multifamily community building there. And I think if you look from the other side, there's going to be a long distance between that facade of the building and any other residential neighbor. We are not proposing any modification of any building setbacks. So, First Selectman Zioli had mentioned, impacts to neighbors from building setbacks. We're not proposing any changes on that. We're proposing changes to setbacks from other commercial uses. And my comment with regard to Milford was only by way of example of multifamily communities, new ones, that are located in direct proximity to commercial uses. And the best example I can give you is on Plains Road. There's a several years old multifamily community of MetroStar that it literally overlooks the new Big Y. Those units leased in a matter of weeks or months. The proximity to I-95, the proximity to a large format grocery store with loading docks and trucks coming and going has not in any way negatively impacted the ability to rent those units. So the reference to Milford is only by way of example that it's no longer unusual to have a multifamily building directly adjacent to a large commercial use, as we'd be proposing here, just as we see in many, many other instances. So we'd love to hear if there's anything specific that you'd like us to work on. We'd love to hear from you.
I have an assignment.
Sure.
Can you tell us how many units per acre would be, what's the math on 3.375? How many units an acre?
You're really putting me on the spot
Yeah,
to
you
actually
did.
do math, I guess.
I did it, but I want to see if I was right.
Well, what did you come up with? I think I could do-
22?
What's that?
22?
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
Okay.
Yeah, 22, yeah.
So, for example, Commission, Fieldstone is 3.75 units per acre for that project, just so we have a sense of scope. And what assignment for Jack and Mr. Nuff, please look at all the other PRD eligible parcels, calculate 22 units per acre, and please tell us what is the potential total if they were all developed under the new regulation. My guess is we'd be north of the 350, so we might have to revisit that too.
Okay.
I think you're touching on a broader point, which is this PRD regulation, whenever it was written, was hopefully crafted so that all of the components worked in concert to support each other. So the FAR created a building size and a density of units that was supported by all of the other, cascading, references in here.
Yeah,
And
I'd
we're
like to-
going in here and touching individual strands of the spider web.
I'd like to give it that presumption,
Okay,
but
but,
that it made sense when it was,
right, but to go in now and like just touch individual strands of that spider web and think that, there aren't a bunch of unintended consequences gonna happen. I mean, if we're interested in looking at this PRD regulation because maybe it's out of date and maybe we need to really look at it, we should be looking at it, 100%
yeah, with a.
From the start.
A blank sheet of paper.
with a
right.
blank sheet of paper, right?
Right.
And somebody that we're, some sort of,
A planning consultant.
right.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we're really, although testimony and, the professionals of an applicant are, useful, if we're looking for a tied-up package, we should count on ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it obviously wasn't something on our radar. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not like we decided it was urgent that we modify our PRD regulations. And I guess, I don't know, a lot of modifications that we've agreed to, well, they don't get to us because they're not brought up on our own initiative. They're brought up on, an application. But you're right, your point is well taken. I mean, we'd have to look at this in a much more closely to understand what
Well,
impact
we have
it.
to understand the impacts of the proposed changes on the zone,
Yeah,
not just on the parcel.
right,
On the zone.
because
And
you
how
gotta
does that
look at
impact
every
the town?
property that it potentially,
Could exist on, right.
right, and that was my question about an assemblage. I mean, it could involve, properties that we can't even imagine it might involve at this point in time.
Right, but we can do the analysis on the ones that we know
Yeah.
we have.
Well, and to that, apparently when in 92 or what, 92, they wanted to hit a pause button if they hit a 350 housing units. What do we have in place already? Any idea?
Number of affordable units would be, the one who would keep track of it is the assessor.
But no,
No,
total
not-
units,
no,
the
this is
PRD
just-
zone. How-
Oh, in the PRD,
That's another
yeah,
assignment
that
for you.
Developed
for
under
2
the
weeks.
PRD.
All right,
Yeah,
well,
Silverbrook, I think is. I think so.
I don't think, we need to, I think it'd be my inclination to keep the public hearing open at this point. Everybody agree with
There's
that?
a lot to digest.
Yeah, we have a lot that you gave us to,
No, I
and
understood,
testimony to
and
consider.
please know that if you have other questions that come up, as we all do, as you're driving to work or doing whatever, carving the turkey, that it's like, wait, why didn't I ask, so please,
yeah, we could get those questions to you through Jack easily enough.
and here's the last two things, and I hope I'm not belaboring the point. One is, when we indicated what other parcels would be susceptible, we tried to look at those that are reasonably likely. Yes, you could assemble and take that sort of,
Right.
but we'll look at all of them, happy to do that. And then I think you can understand why we're sort of scratching our heads when you see residential off of Peck Lane with sewer, but you can't be next to it's like, okay, well, maybe that was a mistake, so that was the point of our application. It's like trying to reconcile some of the things that just frankly seem inconsistent, so.
And upon review, we might, in fact, decide to let the marketplace decide whether you're too close to the back of Raymore and Flanagan. But, Commissioner, Mr. Zioli had said that his recollection was that there were a number of noise complaints because of proximity of residences to
Understood.
housing. So that, maybe that is something to keep in mind also. Maybe it's not a distance, maybe it's a sound issue. The buffer, what you're buffering might be different than distance.
Understood. Okay.
All right, then, let's keep the public hearing open. Go over to our next meeting.
December 5th.
Yeah, and if anybody has any questions, we can get them to the applicant through Jack.
Right.
And, again, the meeting is open to the public, so if anybody here tonight or who comes to the meeting 2 weeks from now has anything they want to add to the record, you're perfectly welcome to do that. But I think that covers it for now.
Okay.
All right, is that, everybody set with that? Okay. Very good, thank you, John.
Thank you very much. Happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you,
as well.
happy
Thank
Thanksgiving.
you.
All right, so that concludes our agenda. Is someone prepared to move that we close the meeting? Did I hear it? A mo-
Motion to adjourn.
We knew it was gonna be tough for that, Paul.
We have a motion.
Second.
It's been seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
At 8:50. Thank you. Thank you and happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
So Deborah, for the next minute.